Hello everyone, my name is Dustin with Mars Hill Technology, and today we're going to be continuing our lesson on your digital front door. This is week 3 of 4 for your digital front door, and today we're going to be talking about the eyes and ears and the walls. So if you missed week 1 and 2, we have a playlist called Tech Talk that you're more than welcome to check out for that. We usually link the last weeks in the very end of the actual video here on YouTube, so you can click that to see week 2. And that was a good lesson about the guest Wi-Fi. But we're going to be talking about some of those smart devices that you have on your network, how they're listening, watching, and reporting back. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. So the big idea is your house is listening, watching, and reporting. A lot of people don't realize how many devices are on their network. They've just connected them over the years or months if your network's relatively new, and we never go and audit or check some of these privacy settings that are on your devices. You want to kind of understand how they work, how they collect data, where that data is being stored, that kind of information before you actually add it on your network and really evaluate it. A lot of people think that hackers are the biggest issue when it comes to privacy in their home, and that's not the case. It's actually big tech or marketing agencies that are collecting data on you, or these companies where you buy a cheap device or a cheap Internet of Thing device and you add it on your network, and the reason it's cheap is because they're selling your information. So we kind of want to look at these devices in a whole. We want to look at some of the good things about these devices and why you want them on your network, and some of the information you should be reviewing. So that's some of the information we're going to be going over a little bit today. Like I said, we're going to be talking about smart devices and how many are actually on your network. It's something to think about. We're going to talk about 2 different kinds of devices. Some that might be listening and just be on your network and things of that nature. So we kind of want to look at how they actually collect data and what their data they're being collected. We're going to talk about your TV, which is one of the worst items to actually have on your network, and something you should really consider and check in your privacy about how the data is being collected. We'll talk about those cameras and doorbells and doing local hosting a little bit. We don't want to go too advanced in these topics, but we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. So, how many smart devices are actually in your home? If you could identify every device, I'm sure you'd miss 1 or 2 devices that you forgot about that are on your network that you're not commonly like using or actively using in your device. You put it on your network, you just forgot about it. And a lot of homes, and the study here is 16 to 22, have 16 to 22 connected devices in their home, especially with larger homes with 4 people. You might have added a smart speaker a few months ago, and then you really liked it, and then you added another 3 in different rooms in your houses, and you're like, oh, I want to add 1 more into the basement so I can talk and tell my family that dinner's ready. And then smart TVs, you added 1, and you're like, oh, I love having Netflix on my TV in the living room. Well, I'll do 1 in my bedroom. Oh, in the kids' rooms, put 1 there in the bonus room. There's another one. And then the doorbells, you're like, well, we got 1 doorbell camera, so we got to add that. And then you bought a plug, and you really love those plugs because you don't have to keep changing and turning off all your devices or turning them on every day. So you bought 3. And then there was a sale on a 5-pack of them, so you add another 5 on your home network, and you got those going. And then you got a thermostat, that's in the hallway, and you got 1 in your master bedroom and 1 in each room in your house there. So you got another couple thermostats, and then you got watches and phones. You might have bought a couple Apple Watches, then your kid's got it 1, and then your kid has a phone now, and then you have another phone. So next thing you know, we have 28 devices on the network. A lot of people don't realize how many different devices they've added to the network over time. And some devices they've just, don't use anymore, and they're still connected to the network. So it's something to think about. Can you name every device that's on your network? Well, probably not. And you can always go in your router and check out devices, but they're not clearly identified thermostat. They might be a Linux computer, which most everything runs on Linux these days. So, and you can't identify. There might be 30 Linux computers on your network, and you don't know what they are. So it's good to kind of really think about your devices and what's actually on your network, and if you even need them on the network. So what kind of devices are we talking here? There's 2 different types of smart devices. There's some that are always listening, that have a microphone built into them, and then there's some that are quietly chatting, which is just routing information throughout your network and communicating to other things on your network. So what about a smart speaker? What would you think? Would it be a mic, camera, or a network only? Well, of course, a smart speaker is a mic. Typically that's how you prompt it with AI that's on that actual device is, hey, I want you to start a timer, and then the device goes ahead and starts up. You give it the trigger word, and then it goes ahead and does its thing and gives you information. So the mic's always hot, ready to rock and roll. Something to think about. Smart TVs, what do you have on smart TV? Well, it's a Mac, mic and tracking your viewing on your screen. And we're going to talk about that here in a second with smart TVs. A lot of people don't realize that. Your doorbells, what are you doing that? Well, some of these doorbells have mics and cameras. So they'll have a camera and a mic set up on the actual doorbell. And I'll give a quick example of this. When I had a moving company, I had a helper with me, and we were moving a sofa in a house, and the client came out the door, and it was this attractive young lady. And one of the guys that was working with me, his eyes got really big, and then we went inside and dropped off the couch, and we were coming out, and I was going to go get another piece of furniture out of the actual moving van. And as soon as we got like 15 steps out of the house, he says, "Man, that woman was beautiful," And I told him, I was like, "Hey, one, we got to be professional and everything as we're working," but I was like, another thing is there's a doorbell right there that every time something moves in front of that doorbell, it records it and records the video and the conversation. And a lot of times, a lot of couples are all walking from their house, and they're actually walking out, and they're talking, having a conversation, and it might be a little bit private. So be really careful when you're actually getting some of these Ring doorbells and things of that nature. They're very handy, but you also got to be careful about what you're saying. You never know what's listening. What about a smart bulb? Well, smart bulbs don't really have mics or cameras, so it's just network. So this device is just connecting to the network to receive firmware updates and commands to turn off and on from some sort of hub. And but another thing is they're actually communicating with other devices. When a device is on a network, it can communicate with other devices. So it's actively being able to communicate and know what other items you have on the actual home network. So it's something to think about. Thermostat, same principle there. It's network only, but it still can communicate. So it's good to think about these. What devices are actually listening and what are just quietly chatting on your network. So those smart speakers, they're very convenient, but we need to really think about the smart devices smart speakers in our network here. And the good news is a lot of these devices, you can actually go in there and audit these devices. You can log into the accounts, and you can set up a few settings to be able to delete some of the information. But how many of us actually do that? I would say probably none of us. I would say about 1% actually go in there and review some of the data that's being collected about us and check it. But that is the good news about some of these smart speakers, such as Amazon's and Google's here. You can go in privacy and you can see the activities, and you can go ahead and delete some of those. If you don't know how to do this, like we say in every class, you can go on to Google or use an AI assistant or AI resource or tool, and you can actually look up your model number, and it'll tell you exactly how to do that, step by step, how to check those settings. So you want to go in with these smart speakers and make sure that you have auto delete off, or at least turn off help improve. This is some information that you don't really have to elect to do. A lot of people don't uncheck boxes, and they get a lot of bloatware on computers, and they get a lot of privacy information. So slow down during the wizards or the installation processes and uncheck some of these features. You want to turn off help improve. That's data that you're sending back that you don't necessarily need to. So a lot of people don't do that, and they're required by law to actually give you the opt-out option whenever it's coming to their privacy. So make sure you're checking that one off. So here's some of the things that some of the devices that you don't really think about. That TV that you have in your house, you have Netflix, and you have Amazon and Disney Plus and all these different streaming apps, and you don't realize that you didn't pay a cent to have these apps on your home device. So how do they collect money for these devices to be able to be put on there, and the software development, and the monitoring and everything of that nature that they need to have on all these devices? Well, they sell some of your data, and it's called ACR. It's automatic content recognition. So when your TV is running, it's actually doing snapshots of whatever's on your screen, whatever it might be, a little picture, and it sends it back, and it's sold to advertisers. You got to think about it. Those TVs that you bought back in the day. When I was in the Air Force, I remember I had to pay like $1,200 for my TV, and it was like a 50-inch or 48-inch at the time. And as you probably have noticed over the years, those TVs have gone from $1,200 to like $300 or $400, and you're like, well, did it get more efficient? No, they've partnered with some of these marketing agencies to sell your data, and sometimes people don't upgrade their TVs for a long time, so they make so much money on that actual TV. You're just basically paying for the shipping or the parts for the device now, to get it to you, because they want to sell that data. And 99% of us don't ever change these privacy. We plug it up, connect it to the internet, and then there it is. But you should go into your TV settings, and these are three major manufacturers of TVs, and just check it to make sure that your privacy, that you're turning off ACR or viewing data. They like to be tricky and use different words for that type of technology, because some people might already be aware of that, so they want to make sure that it's obscure and that you don't know what's going on. So if whenever you get a device, you should always go through the privacy. You should always go and figure out how the data is being stored, how secure it is, what data is being collected, all that kind of information. And the thing about it these days is all those little contracts that you've always clicked through. I accept the terms and conditions of this contract. You can take all those contracts now and throw them into an AI model, and they'll tell you exactly what data is being collected on you and where it's being stored and doing all this, because they have to by law. They have to put that information out there, so you can always check it. But you always should do your research on any smart device before you just throw it on your network. Is it worth the risk having it on your network? And TVs are a big one. My advice for TV people that want to use TVs and everything is either self-host your own apps, your own services, which is a little hard. You can do that, or you want to go and at least get them off your network and use some sort of device that you're purposely using to stream content on your TV. Don't use the TV, built-in apps or whatever. You want to use like an Apple TV. It's not much better when it comes to privacy, but it's a lot better than these manufacturers like Vizio, Samsung, and LG. They have sent in all that information. And all those remotes that you can speak into and make it easy to search and things of that nature, all that information is being sent back for collecting for marketing purposes. So really look at your TV and turn ACR off. Look in the privacy settings. Your camera and doorbells. We just talked about that in an example of that worker that was helping me move that couch in, how they're always monitoring and taking data and everything. You got to think about where that data is being stored. If the vendor gets breached, where's the information going? What information do they have? Is it sensitive information? Is it encrypted at least from all these places? Can anyone get access to it? Can the police department or a company be able to get information or access to it? You'd be surprised. Some of these manufacturers, for smart devices, they might share data with other companies, and with or without your consent, because you wouldn't think about it, but you clicked one little box that says I agree to these terms and conditions, and they might be sharing your data to some sort of organization you don't want it to be. So be thinking about that. Also, shared logins get misused all the time, especially when it comes to cameras and doorbells. And door locks when it comes to that. You share a passcode with someone, they share it with someone, they share it with it. Next thing you know, you can't audit who has a password and who doesn't. So be really cautious about who you're sharing login information with your camera and how you're doing that. If you just write it on a piece of paper or send it out in a big group chat, be really careful about how you're sharing that. So, like always, use strong, unique passwords, two-factor logins, authentication, and automatic firmware updates when you're coming to sensitive devices such as cameras and doorbells. That's a big one. If you're really tech savvy and you know how to do it, set it up on another VLAN. I have mine on a different security VLAN. I've got a bunch of VLANs because I can create a bunch of them, but you want to kind of isolate them because you don't want things chattering with your security. You don't want things, if something does get hacked, you want to mitigate that damage. So, or if it gets exposed somehow. So you want to kind of do that. Think about that whenever you're adding those devices on your network. So bulbs, plugs, and thermostats, these don't collect a lot of data on you, but they do connect on your network. So they can send information and that nature whenever it comes to network logging and connecting to the gateway of your actual or router in your home. So really think about that when you're adding a device. Do you need a bulb? Do you need this plug on your actual network? Do you need any of that capability? Some of these devices work perfectly well. We've been using them for a long time without having these, having a smart device. You don't have to connect a smart plug to every device in your home, but if it makes your life easier, that's something that you should really consider. If it's worth the trade-off of some privacy or some risk in your on your network. So you should probably be putting those on your guest network, like we always talk about. Put it on your guest network. Doesn't matter if it's talking to your other devices or whatever, but you don't want to communicate into maybe some of your more sensitive or on some of your more important devices like your main computers, your business computers, or your things of that nature. So put them on that guest network. Easy to do, but you definitely want to have, especially like thermostats. You definitely want them to be able to get firmware updates and everything like that. So you always want to change those default passwords too. If you're ever setting up anything, always change default passwords. Make sure that the makers are still supporting the device. We always talk about the rule of 7 years. If the device is over 7 years, it's typically not receiving security updates anymore. So be very cautious about that. So one weak gadget like I have here can expose that whole network. So that's one major reason we put it on the guest network. If it ever gets compromised, it's just taking out your one guest network is being compromised, and not your whole entire house when it comes to that. And that's a very big importance of doing VLANs if you haven't done that in a home environment yet. So we talked about that gas Wi-Fi last Tuesday, and this is exactly where your smart devices should live. Unless you're communicating on your home network and you have to have access to them on your home network, they should be on your guest network. And all those devices, they just do whatever they need to do, and then they ping back home to some sort of SaaS environment or some sort of cloud environment, and then that cloud environment is what you connect to with your phone. So they don't really need to be connecting to your actual phone or whatever in your actual home. They're actually connecting to a cloud, so they can be comfortable on that guest Wi-Fi and not on your actual main network. So here's some settings that you should be doing tonight for every smart device. Make sure you change those default passwords. Turn on two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Can't harp on that enough. Like you always want to be changing and making it a little bit more difficult to access some of your information, especially more secured information. Turn off that share data to improve the product. Like I said, it's a little check mark. Go ahead and uncheck it. Take your time when you're doing that. Turn off cross device tracking and ads. These are all in privacy settings. Turn off everything you can in privacy. Like I said, use Google or an AI tool to be able to assist you with different products if you have any questions on it. We're happy to help you if you have some questions about privacy. You can always reach out to our company. We can help you with IT support and how to do that, walk you through it and everything. Happy to do that. But turn off all those information so you don't have it tracking everything you're doing in your home. And a common question is, should I just unplug my Alexa? Well, if you don't use it, you should definitely unplug it. If you're not using it actively, and you got to think about, like I said earlier in this video, is you should think about a device before you put it on there. Are you using it daily? And you got to think about where it's at. Like if your device is in your kitchen, what are you using the device for? If it's on the Wi-Fi, it has the capability to do whatever. But what are you using it for? Are you just listening to music on it? Well, you don't need the mic on, so turn the mic off. There's a mute button on all those little smart devices or the smart speakers that you can just turn on. It isolates the mute part. If you're not asking it questions and you're not using it for the internet capability that's on the device, you should probably just take it off your network. So either reset it or turn that off if there's a feature in there. But if you're not using it, you should probably think about taking it off or whatever off your network. But if you are using it, make sure that you have it connected and that you know the privacy and how it's being stored and how you can do that if you're concerned about that. And if you have the device, you should think about like where you're putting the device. Is it in your bedroom? Is that some information that might be sensitive that you might not want there? If it's in a conference room or something, or a law office or whatever it might be, do you really want that into something that might be talking about financial data or details about a case or something of that nature? So be really careful about where you put these, and think about it. Do you even use that voice feature for whatever it is? If it's just a speaker, you don't need it on the network. You can do Bluetooth with speakers and everything. If it's a cheap off-brand item, you should really think about that. It's probably not getting a lot of security updates, or it's going to take a long time to receive a security update, even if it does get vulnerabilities. So that's another weak point in your whole entire network. So be really careful about that. And there's no shame in keeping it plugged up or unplugging it. Just kind of understand the consequences or the risks that you're taking when you have it on a network, and you might not need it necessarily. So nothing wrong with unplugging it, if you're not using it. When is a device too dumb to keep? So, like I said, the golden rule is 7 years old. If the device is 7 years old, if you can't change those default passwords on it, that's a big no-no. If you can't log into it or the maker stops sending updates, it'll tell you like end of service life on the item. That's when you want to retire it. And before you buy that next one, you should think about the device. Like I said, how does it connect? How does it store my data? All these information. Is it cheap for a reason? They're probably selling it or whatever. So look through there. And then always the common questions, which is regular firmware updates. Does it receive it? Yep, that's good. Does the maker have a privacy policy you can actually read and follow? Because like I said, they're going to make it obscure. And that's a good indication that that's a company you probably don't want to have a device in. If you don't know how it's working or they don't have enough information on it, it's probably being sneaky about it. So something you could do. Is there a version that works without the cloud? Everyone loves the cloud these days, and there's a reason for it. It makes it a lot easier to actually manage data and connect to it remotely anywhere in the world. But do you really need that? Most of the time, we can actually opt into a product that's just local based in our own network. That just works with Bluetooth. Some of that nature doesn't have to do all these things. In IT world, and also in the home lab environment, there's self-hosted devices. These are devices that you configure, set up once, and then device locally connects to it, but it never leaves your actual home environment. And there's a lot of value in that because one, you're not paying for subscriptions, and two, you control your data, which is amazing. Get down that rabbit hole if you ever want to do home lab and doing your own details. But that's a great thing to do these days, is to collect your own data and not have it go somewhere else. So if you have the capability to do it local, I always suggest it. And is the brand still going to be there in a few years? If you're buying an obscure brand on Amazon or eBay, is it a major brand? If it's not, it's probably going to go away. There's a lot of companies that don't make it, especially in tech. So be really careful about that. And a smart device that stops getting updates isn't smart anymore. It's just a risk. So be really careful about that in your home when you're putting these devices. So here's some homework for you to think about and do at your leisure. Just pick a device. Every day or every other day. If you're on a spree and you really like it and you want to keep going, choose one whole series. I want to do all my plugs since they're the same brand. Easy. Go ahead and go and check on there, check all the privacy, update all the firmware, that kind of thing. Make sure it's automatic. And if you have to do it as scheduled maintenance, think about it. Is it worth it to have to come in here quarterly and update this firmware manually? Or could I buy a device that does it automatically, or not at all? So think about all that. Just take one device though, and just do one at a time. You don't have to do all 23 today. Just do one at a time. Use the most used smart device. Start there first. TVs is the number one target you should be choosing today. Open its app or privacy dashboard. Make sure you're looking through all the privacy. If you have any questions, go on Google or your AI tool and then ask those questions to it. Simple as that to change that. Always set up two-factor authentication. Go really slow when you're checking those boxes and everything with what you agree upon. Always try to turn off sharing your data or sending diagnostic reports or whatever. They have to, by law, give you the option for privacy and consent to get out of these things. The same thing with marketing emails. Man, we get enough of those. So click that off. And then move those smart devices to guest network like we talked about last week. And that's it. You finished up week 3. Appreciate you joining us here. That was the eyes and ears and the walls. Now, week 4, we're actually going to be peeking behind the curtain, and that's actually using some firewall. We're going to be going to firewall basics. We're not going to go too advanced, as you probably need a certificate or some training to actually do some of the more advanced firewall features. But we're going to talk about some basics in firewall and how you need to know how that works and what it is. We're also going to talk about VPNs. You've heard this on YouTube videos all over the place. It's almost like every tech video starts with some sort of ad. If you haven't noticed, I don't do ads. Of course, this is for my customers in the area, but a lot of those ads, they talk about getting a VPN. We're going to talk about the basics in VPNs and why you should probably be using one, or some of the reasons you might be wanting to use one to connect to your home network while you're traveling around. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next week's lesson. Once again, if you ever need any help, reach out to us. It's marshalltechnology.com. You can send us some information. Be happy to help you. We primarily help customers in Western North Carolina, but if you're anywhere in the States and you need some help, we're happy to help you there. We do remote IT help for you. We're a complete MSP, managed service provider for so many different tools and advanced security features such as EDRs, RMMs, and even SOC details if you ever need any of that for your business, small, medium, or in a home environment. We do that. And we can also just give you advice, all that kind of information for you too. So if you need any help, you're more welcome to do that. And since this is week 3 of our 4-week class, we always like to do a vote for series that allows you to vote kind of in your series for the next one that's going to be talked about. This is primarily focused on our customers and residents here in Western North Carolina, but we're happy to hear from you on YouTube. So that also has a play in it as well. So if you want to kind of vote on this, you can just send it in the comments here on YouTube on which one of these categories you'd like to do. We're going to be talking about either master your smartphone, AI in plain English, and then finally your digital estate. So if you want to vote on these, just send a little comment here on YouTube, and we'll put that into the pot of what we're going to be talking about in the next little series. But appreciate you joining us today. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel if you want more information, and there'll be a link to our last video right here and also to our channel. So thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of your week.